Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Demai, Perek Chamishi. We're going to conclude Halacha Vav, learn Halacha Zayin, and learn Halacha Ches. We're going to be learning Daf Mem Ches. We left off on Daf Mem Ches, Amud Aleph, at the end of the second line from the top, Amar Rabbi Yoina. We are referring back to the Mishnah in Halacha Vav, speaking about a balabas, a homeowner who's selling produce. So as we learned in the Mishnah, the presumption is, as for example, if he's selling vegetables, he's selling his own. And therefore, if a buyer buys from him today, a buyer buys from him tomorrow, a buyer buys from the same balabas in one city or in another city, generally the halacha is ma'ased mizeh al zeh, because it's all coming from the same balabas. Like we said, he's an amaretz. Either he's always ma'ased or he's never ma'ased. So there's no issue of chiyuv ala ptur, ptur ala chiyuv. However, the Mishnah says if he's selling it in the shuk, then the presumption is that the balabas also bought produce from others, and therefore ma'asid mikol achas va'achas. That was the rule in the Mishnah. The last piece of the Gemara before halacha zayin will be the Gemara telling us an exception. We're going to have a scenario that even if the balabas is selling it b'shuk, and we know that he's buying it from other sources, there will be a scenario where still ma'ased mizeh al zeh, as we will explain. Halacha zayin, which will be a very small sugya, the Mishnah is going to move on from buying demai from different people, or potentially from different people. We're now going to be learning about buying tevel from different people. And you have to understand something, that generally the rule is that tevel may never be sold as tevel. Right? Ein adam neshoy limkar tevel. However, the Mishnah will give an exception where a person is allowed to sell tevel. And now the question is, if I buy tevel from Aleph, I buy tevel from Beis, what the halacha will be. And that's going to lead us into halacha ches, beginning with our Mishnah follows Shitas Rabbi Meir, that ein kinyan l'goy be'eretz Yisrael lahafkiya miyad meiser, as we learned already many times in this Masechta. So of course, a goy is exempt from the commandments. So if a goy owns land in Israel and he grows and sells produce, he did not tithe it. Question is whether the product is obligated to be tithed. Our Mishnah follows the opinion, yes, it is midoy daisa. And therefore, if a person buys tevel from a yid and lahavdil tevel from a goy, ma'asrin mishel Yisrael al shel goyim ba'al shel goyim for the yid. In other words, it has the same level of chiyuv. Same thing when it comes to a kuti, as we'll learn in the Mishnah. Okay? And the second topic in the Mishnah will be about the otzitz nakuf. Now, otzitz nakuf is a topic that we have throughout Shas. It's applied in different scenarios. Here we're learning, the Ikar Adin. If you have a product growing in a perforated flower pot, in a perforated vase, it's an atzutz that has a hole. Now, whether this atzutz nakuf is mamish laying on the ground, or whether we will even apply it if the atzutz nakuf is a bit above the ground, let's just speak it out right now, is really subject to a machlokes rishonim. The Rambam and Perish Mishnayos understands that the rule of an atzutz nakuf, you have a pot, flower pot, that has a hole, and by the way, it has to be large enough for a shoydish cotton, for a small root to go through it. The Rambam holds that an atzutz nakuf is considered mechuber lakarka. So whatever is growing in the pot is growing from the karka. L'chu'ura, that's only when the atzutz nakuf is laying on the ground. Like many people here in their backyards, for whatever reason, they plant a little tree in an atzutz that's laying on the ground. Rashi holds atzutz nakuf is yoinik from the ground. Yenika doesn't have to be dafke if it's physically touching the ground. It taking nourishment is also applicable even when it's a few, we'll see, inches above the ground. But just to know, it's either mechuber or medin yenika, which whatever event, our Mishnah is basically going to follow the rule that something that grows, it's an atzutz nakuf in Eretz Yisrael, is chayiv to be tied biblically. So the same thing, if I have produce that grew from the atzutz nakuf, I have produce that grew on the karka, again, how you could be ma'asir from one on the other. Now here comes the big question. The big question will be, my friends, right? Everything we learned from the beginning of this Pedic was all predicated on the rule that ein ma'asin min al chiyuv al aptur u'min aptur al chiyuv. Now, finally, the Mishnah will discuss what happens if you did that, if you were ma'aser. So we're going to learn basically two different scenarios. One in which what you did really is garnished. Aber, since you called it truma, midrabanan, the Chachamim didn't want something that was designated as truma, even though it was really halachically ineffective. They don't want it to remain the way it was. You have to gift it to the kohen. There's going to be another scenario where there will be another issue, and that is, forget about the fact that you called something truma. We get that, and therefore you don't want it to just revert back to the way it was. If what you did in some scenario is nothing, then what you took off is tevel. So it's not just about giving it to the kohen. The kohen can't eat it. It's not chulin. It will remain tevel the way it was. So now you have to be ma'asid from it, as we will see as we unpackage today's daf. So again, Chevra daf memches amid aleph, 2 lines from the top, right? The balabas selling or anywhere other than in the market versus him selling in the market. The rule is in the market we presume he bought it from other suppliers, from other gardens. And in such a case, again, every gardener, we're speaking about every gardener is an Ama'aretz. Every Ama'aretz might behave differently. And therefore, ma'asin mikolachas ve'achas, not mizelzeh. However, Amar Rabbi Yoina, I'll give you an exception. That loy soif davar migan loisav. The rule that you could be ma'asin from one on everything that you bought isn't only when we know it all came from his garden, therefore sure. Even in a scenario where we know that this balabas is selling you some of what he grew, some of what he bought elsewhere, there's still going to be a case, this will be the case, im ma'asin hein lidatoy, if the owners of the other gardens, if they are ma'asin lidatoy, what does that mean? Some people only have one buyer. We're speaking about, this is not a big business. A person has a garden, just like a hobby, and they grow, they eat, and they sell. But basically, whenever the person whom you're buying it from, if he is the sole client from the other balabatim, that means that they depend on him, they will follow his instructions. In other words, let's say I'm buying it from Reuven. I know that Reuven grows some potatoes in his backyard, but Reuven buys potatoes from Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda. If Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda only sell to Reuven, they're going to listen to what Reuven is telling them, which is either he told them nothing because he doesn't care that much about Trumas or Maaseh, or he told them, listen here, I know, people consider me an Ama'aretz, but I want you to tithe everything, and they will listen to him. In other words, people listen to the customer. That's the word. If Reuven is the sole customer, if you have many customers, you can afford to say to one, go jump in the lake. Why do I have to listen to you? I won't sell to you. I'll sell to someone else. When you have one customer, you listen to them. That's what the Mishnah, that's what the Gemara is saying. That ima asrim heim ledatoy, look inside the Rash Cirilio, 4 lines from the top in the right column, sheheim nishmoyim elav, v'tzrichem loy, because he's the only customer. Ve'im yoyim lahem la'aser, hakoil ya'asru. Umistama lo yavru al datoy shabalabayis. Why? Because the chayfelei, that means that they're subservient to him. They're bending to him. That's the minute. You have to be a bottle to the guy that that gives you pranos. Back inside the maaser, but if it's not a scenario where the others only have Reuven as their client, then that's the rule of the Mishnah. Because that's the general rule. When you buy demai from Am Haaretz A and you buy more demai from Am Haaretz B, you cannot mingle them together. Okay. Now, moving on to Allah Zayin, moving on to the next Mishnah, guys. Atkan was demai. Everything we learned was demai. What happens tevel? How is the Yid even allowed to sell tevel? The Mishnah will give you a reason for an exception. It's not the only exception. But here we go. If If you buy tevel from two different places, from two different people, now when you buy produce, your presumption is never that it's tevel. The worst case scenario is that it's damai. However, so says the Marafulda, yeah, but if the seller told you befedish, I am selling to you tevel, now you know it's tevel. So now we know that even though I bought tevel from Reuven, I bought tevel from Shimon, they're both equally, biblically, mechuyev to be tithe. Min achiyuv al achiyuv. So ma'asen mizelzeh. Now the Mishnah is like answering a question. How is it even shaykh for someone to sell you tevel? Afal pisha amru, even though there is a rule, an ein adam reshoy limkar tevel. Nevertheless, there is a case where tevel could be sold, which will be l'tzoyder, if there is a need. Now let me give you an example of a need. Listen to this. If you, let's say you are Reuven, you have tevel, you have a backyard, and you separated everything. Hakel, everything is great. And now you have chulin. Many times we spoke about meduma. Remember meduma, what happens if truma falls into chulin? I want to ask you a question. What happens if tevel falls into chulin? So let's go with a few rules. Rule number one is, generally there's a rule of bittul. Bittul beroiv. Remember that rule. Midoy raisa. Midarabanan, tevel will never be bottled. Never. Doesn't matter the ratio. Why? Because it's davar sheyesh lematirim. Remember these rules? Davar sheyesh lematirim. Why do you have to rely on bittul? Fix it. Now listen to this. If a person has a scenario where there was a mixture of dir chulin and tevel, if the majority is chulin, which means the tevel just beroiv is bottle, I know the tevel has to be tithe midarabanan. That's one scenario that we will not be talking about purposefully. Explain to you in a moment why. I'm speaking about a scenario where you have roiv tevel, so it's not bottle beroiv. Now, we also learned the din of Bila just 2 days ago, and even we learned that b'demai hekilu, there's no demai over here. And even Rabbi Yochanan, if we're going to learn Pshat and Rabbi Yochanan, I think it was 2 days ago, that he holds that if the items are a kazayas or smaller, even by midoiraisas, we say that you can perfectly intermingle them. But let's speak about not where it's smaller than a kazayas. In other words, you can't, when you have tevel and chulin, let's go on a biblical issue. There's roiv, tevel, what are you going to do? Even if you know, let's say, Vlad, you know that 90% is tevel, 10% is chulin. You can't remove proportionate. Correct. By saying, listen, for the 10%, because we don't say by a doiraisa, if it's big, according to no one, and according to most, even little by a doiraisa issue, you don't say, I'm going to so evenly mingle it that what I remove will be perfect. Tevel for tevel and chulin is not needed. We don't say that. I'm going to be afraid that when I remove something as truma, instead of it being tevel, see, tevel is mesak and tevel, I'm going to be taking chulin for the tevel. That's ptur alachiyuv. So what do? You have to take unfarmishte tevel mimakem acher. You know that there is 90%, you know that there's 10 pounds of tevel. Okay, take other tevel that's not mixed, and from this unmixed tevel, not only be misakin it, be misakin that for the mixed.
Which one is misakin more?
You can't be allowed to be misakin more, and you might end up taking chul. Both, you can't take ma'as, it has to be exact. We already learned that. Ma'aser.
Take it out of the mixture.
You can't take it out of the mixture.
Because you're going to be misakin chulin.
Because you might be using chulin to be misakin tevel, which doesn't work. So this is just a great example. That's a tzoydach. Why would I have to buy tevel? Because I have my stuff. I already was misakin all of my stuff. I separated, and then for some reason my new tevel and chulin got mixed. When Reiv is tevel, I have to be misakin it again using tevel. If I don't own tevel, I have to buy tevel. That will be a justification for someone to sell me tevel. I just want to theorize that if by me the mixture was Reiv chulin, So even though tevel is not bottle, that means midrabanan it has to be tied because it's not bottle because of Yerushalmi. But since midoraisa it's bottle beroiv, so this is only an issue midrabanan. Me buying tevel doiraisa is also not going to be a solution because then you can't be misakin from something that's mechuyev midoiraisa for something that's only mechuyev midrabanan. That's also called chiyav al aptur. What you'll have to do there is you're going to have to buy tevel midrabanan to be misakin tevel midrabanan. But I'm just simplifying the Mishnah. Let's speak about a case where there's a mixture where roiv is tevel, so the issue is a biblical issue. That will be a justification why you would have to buy tevel, and when you have to buy tevel, someone is allowed to sell you tevel. Good. Danny has a look. I don't understand that look. That's your tired, Danny, or you're okay? L'chaim. Here we go.
Read a PhD to go shopping.
Oh, Zot the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yoinon. Kaini Masnisom. It's correct to interpret our Mishnah and to really add two words that we didn't have in the Mishnah. Then the Mishnah is speaking about you bought tevel from two different people, and the question is, where do you bought tevel? No one is even allowed to sell tevel, and even the Am Haaretz did not sell tevel. So the Mishnah Taka said that. Then now we have to add another layer. When there is a tzorech, to whom can you sell tevel? You're never allowed to sell tevel to an Am Haaretz because the Am Haaretz might not fully tithe it. You understand? So therefore, let's add, even though the Mishnah doesn't have the words, ubelvad l'chaver, the buyer has to be a chaver.
So is tevel not just produce that just doesn't even take?
What was that? Yeah. So when it comes to kashrus,
produce you can't sell.
Yeah, that's what we keep on learning. Kashrus, when I sell food, I don't have to sell it kosher. I can sell you an animal. You deal with shchita.
Right.
When I shech the animal, as long as you know it's not salted, you can salt it. No, it's by kashrus, the onus is I'm not allowed to eat non-kosher. Whoever sells it wherever it's at, and they notify. The rule by tevel, you can't do that. Right. Unless there is a tzorech, I cannot tell you, it's tevel, you do it. You're not allowed to do that. No one, not the growers, not tevel, the mai, never tevel. Very good, David. The wholesalers can only sell the mai. As wholesaler who's a chaver who bought the mai can sell the mai, but he's never there. You're never allowed to.
What does the farmer do?
The farmer has to separate. No, as a farmer who is an Amoritz, when you buy something from him, the presumption is it's the mai, not tevel. That's why we need to find a reason. There's a there's a reason. Someone had this mixture, so they need new tevel. So then they tell the farmer, I need tevel. He can sell. Says the Gemara, yeah? The farmer, whoever, can only sell it to a chaver. So now 1 second. So what's going to happen to an Amoritz who has this mixture? What is he going to do?
But there's a professor kasha here.
No.
Who sells tevel? If you can't have tevel to sell because you can't sell it to anyone.
So that's what I'm saying. That's what we just explained in the Mishnah. That if, let's say you have land. I have land. But whatever I did, at the end of my day, I made a shalom. I have in my house a big barrel, famish, tevel, and chulin. So I go over to you and I tell you, Vlad, I have tevel mixed in chulin. We're both learned people. We both learned this stuff. We both know that I need new tevel. And I tell you, Vlad, I don't have new tevel. I already... But he did. No. You can sell it if you were not masakin yet. You know you're never allowed to sell tevel. But in this scenario, you can sell it to me. If I tell you why I need it, I tell you, no, I need for you to sell me tevel. So you tell me, I'm not allowed to sell tevel. So I'm telling you, no, there's a tzorech. This tzorech allows you to sell me tevel. That's only if I'm a chaver. So says the Gemara, Ma'atam. So what's going to happen?
Is it all any Amaretz could say?
No, it's choppy. It's choppy. Nachamal.
Is it only a chaver that could say I have a need, or any Amaretz can come and say I have a need?
Every Amaretz has a need. Amaretz never ate tevel. No one ate tevel gamur. So what will Amaretz do? So asks the Gemara, Ma'ata Amaretz and a sort of tiblei bechulin ein loy takana. What is he going to do? He has to throw it out. So the answer is Kate always. The answer is the Gemara, no problem. He goes to a chaver, and the chaver goes to someone who still has tevel. The chaver buys the tevel on behalf of the Amaretz. The chaver does the separations, and so that If that's right, the chaver will buy the tevel for the amaretz, and the chaver will tithe it for the amaretz.
How does he measure how much tevel is in the mixed part?
No, there has to be that they knew. Has to be that they knew. And if they didn't know, then I'm not going to talk it out right now. Then you have to go start saying tanoim and stipulations. It gets complicated. It's just right. I know that I had 6 pounds of tevel, and I have over here 4 pounds of chulin. I know.
So you're gonna measure this tevel against that.
Means I only have to set only against the 6. Even though I have over here a total of 10 pounds, I'm being toidim umaasid only on 6. It's no big no.
Tevel you just got.
From the tevel that I got, not only will I remove myself for it, I will make believe as if there's another 6 pounds in there. And we already learned it's not the way people think. Remember, we learned that if I'm being ma'asid from here on there, it's not 10. It's not 10 from 100. Remember, it's 11.1. Just remind everyone. A different cheshbonis. For that, Yakir, you have to go back. Okay, halacha ches. Let's go.
By the way, I don't get this whole Rabbi Yoina.
I knew it.
Like
Why didn't you get Rabbi Yoina?
You have a Amaretz who knows he has a problem. He has a mixture of tevel and chulin.
Yep.
So he needs to go buy tevel in order to fix his thing. And what does the Rav to say? Oh no, we're afraid that he may eat it without taking off his meishers. What does that mean?
That means no, he'll take up Truma Gedoyla. No, it's the tevel itself. What's the Amaretz? The tevel itself. Forget about how he'll use it to be masakin. He cares about Truma Gedoyla. He might not separate Meiser, which means he won't separate Trumas Meiser, and he'll eat it that way. It means exactly what it means. Many Amaratzim thought that the only thing you have to really, really be concerned about is Truma Gedoyla. So therefore, when he had his tevel mixed with chulin, he has a problem because he will never eat tevel that has Truma Gedoyla. He only cares about the Truma Gedoyla. And in the tevel that he bought, forget about that he'll take off from it Truma Gedoyla for the mixed tevel. He'll also only take off Truma Gedoyla for this tevel, for the one that he bought, and he won't take off my sedition.
But then it becomes a divide.
That's the problem. Yeah, then it becomes the mind. And we're not allowed
So it's not as great an issue anymore.
It's not as great as, but it's a problem. Okay, let's go weiter. Says the Mishnah. All the Hemshech. Ma'asrin mishal Yisrael al shal goyim. Umishal goyim al shal Yisrael. Right, this is the sheet of Rabbi Meir that ein kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael hafkiya miyad ma'asin. So of course, again, the goy won't do anything. The goy is not a bar mitzvah. But the fact that the goy owns land, it doesn't remove the land from its kedusha. Produce needs to be tithed. And if a Jew buys that produce from a goy, it's mechuyev to be tithed biblically. So if I buy produce from a yid and I also buy lahavdol produce from a goy, I buy produce from a goy, they are both equally obligated midoiraisa. So, weiter. We're hearing of Sakoil of Malach Mecholus here. Now, another topic, Umishal Yisrael al Shal Kutim, as we mentioned so many times, we're not going to repeat the whole story over here, but this Mishnah holds that Kutim are bona fide Yidden. On the other hand, since even though they themselves were Toidim Ma'asar for themselves, but since they misinterpreted Lifnei Evil Sit and Michel, they learned it literally. Either it dafka does not mean literally, or it also doesn't mean literally, whichever one. Lifnei Evil Sit and Michel means that I'm not allowed to sell to you produce that's untied. They didn't believe in that. So when you buy produce from a kuti, they did not hide anything for you. So it's equally mechuyev. And likewise, from one kuti on the other, same idea. Because none of them would tithe it. Whatever you buy from a kuti is tevel gamur. Okay? Now, Rabbi Lazar, in other words, we're speaking about tevel. So you bought it from a yid, and you bought produce from a goy. They're both tevel gomer. You both produce from a kuti. It's tevel gomer. However, Rabbi Lazar said mishal kutim mashal kutim zoisloi, and we're going to wait not until tomorrow, but until in 2 days. On Daf Nun, we're going to come back to this machlokes, and we'll explain shitas Rabbi Lazar. The Tanakama makes sense. The Tanakama simply holds, like we always learned, a kuti doesn't care about lifnei even. and a kuti will sell you tevel. Okay. Now, next.
He ushers even taking.
From one on the other. No, if he doesn't say that you for sure they are on the same level. We're always looking for, if you're taking from one on the other, they have to be equally obligated. Okay. Now,
You bought from two different.
Meaning you bought from two different kutim.
Of course.
You can't type them all at once.
According to Rabbi Lazar, no.
Okay.
And that will have to be explained because again, kutim l'chayda, anything you buy from a kuti should be tevel no. Next case.
Oh, sorry. Unishel goyim al shel Yisrael. Yisrael means Amaretz.
No, Yisrael is the Yisrael that we had in the previous Mishnah. That l'tzoydech he sold with tevel. Even in Amaretz won't sell you tevel. Now that we introduced, you can buy from a Yitevel in those l'tzoydech. So if I buy tevel from a Yid and I buy produce from a guy, I buy it, and now I have in my house these two packages, these two bags. I can trade them from one on the other because they're both completely tevel. Next case, otzitz nakuf, based on the halach that produce that grows from a perforated pot. Perforated, we said the whole Joey has to have the size of a small root. I don't know what that means in inches. So then the rule is, the fact that you're planting something in a ceramic and ceramic is porous, that in itself doesn't make it considered connected to the ground. But if there is mamish a hole in the pot, which is the norm, so then even though the hole is very little and the pot is very big, everything in the pot either is considered to be in the ground or everything in the pot is drawing nourishment from the ground, whichever way you learn, Rambam or Rashi, that which grows in the pot in Israel is mechuyev to be tied midoiraisa. No, it's otzitz nakav alei ha'aretz, and therefore, kadam min ha'aretz al otzitz nakuf, or in the other way around, mi otzitz nakav al ha'aretz. In other words, if I own everything. So if you're asking, how do I have tevel? I grew it. Some of what I grew, I have two trees, guys. I have two fig trees, one in the ground, one in the pot. And I harvested the figs. Now I'm going to be toidim u'ma'aser. So I don't care if I took from the ground for the pot or everything from the pot for the ground, right? Truma say truma, because they're both equally chayiv midoiraisa, right? That's easy. Now let's begin. Now it's going to get exciting. And this is going to be finally what happens. What happens when you are toidim u'ma'aser min achiv al aptur? You never spoke it out. Now we'll speak out. So there's going to be two cases. There can be 1,000 cases, but it's going to be all under either or. Now, just as an example, let's say I have I'm going with my figs. We have two fig trees. One is growing in a perforated pot, which means that biblically it has to be tied. The other one is growing in a non-perforated pot with no holes. Even though rabbinically it has to be tied, make no mistake. Midrabanan, I have to be toidim u'ma'aser, but not midoraisa. So they don't have the same level of obligation. So what happens if I removed it? Now you have to halt cup, guys. This is the key, not to get confused. You have a total now of 100 figs. Let's say 50-50. It doesn't matter the numbers. Now, am I separating it from the Eino Nakuf? It's less problematic. Why is it less problematic? Because that Eino Nakuf, at least biblically, is b'chval not tevel. Doesn't have to be tied. It's like something that grows in LA. You make a bracha and you eat it, as long as it's not arla. Okay? That will be the first case. The problem is that since the Eino Nakuf is not mechuyev, I'm speaking only doiraisa, it cannot serve as truma for the nakuf. That means that everything that grew in the perforated pot is still tevel. That which I took off really was ineffective. Not suffix, ineffective, because I took something from the Eino Nakuf. The Eino Nakuf is not mechuyev to be tied. Saying this is truma for the Nakuf is a nonsensical statement. Doesn't work that way. You cannot be tied. Now, what about this? So this biblically remains non-problematic the way it was biblically, but the nakuf produce is completely tevel midoirais.
The one that's in a knuckle is what?
So what I removed, I have to emphasize, biblically is fine. Speaking doirais.
Yeah.
You have to hold copper. One second, let me just speak it up. Now, since the declaration was nonsensical, you would argue it should still be property of the owner. The Mishnah says, if what you removed was from the she'enoi nakuf, only for the nakuf, so even though, so what you did, the Mishnah says, achidish, truma, why truma we'll see in a moment, we call that truma, mean you have to give it to a kohen, but all of the produce that grew in the nakuf is still biblically tevel. So v'yachzer v'yitreim, and obviously the new truma has to come from something that's chayiv to be tithed. Now, really, the key here is that the Mishnah is saying truma, that's a new din derabanan for people not to treat truma lightly. That if something was declared as truma, even if really it's completely ineffective, midrabanan, you called it truma, give it to a kohen. Now let me go in the reverse. The reverse is even worse. What will be the reverse? That what happens if you removed from the nakuf only for the she'eno nakuf in that direction? Now again, the produce that's eno nakuf biblically doesn't need anything.
Correct.
What you removed, min nakuf, what you removed was ineffective because you can't remove min achiv al aptur. But if it's ineffective, now what is it? Biblical tevel. If I took from min hanakul, that's tevel. If my declaration of truma is not valid, which it's not, so it remains biblical tevel. We already said that once you declared something truma, even if it's ineffective, midrabanan, you have to give it to a kohen. Here we have to add another layer. It's not enough for you to give it to the kohen. The kohen can't eat it because you gave him tevel. Let's read it inside. So min hanakul al she'en hanakul. So kohen called the same din derabanan, even though what you did was biblically bichlal ineffective. Nevertheless, midrabanan it's truma. But here it's not enough for you. I gave it to the kohen and shalom al Yisrael. No, but v'lo say achel, meaning the kohen. The kohen cannot eat the truma at sheyoytzi aleha truma u'maisris until he removes from it for it, or from another table midoiraisa for it, because what you gave itself remains table midoiraisa.
Is the owner giving a portion, or he's giving the whole thing to the farm?
The owner is giving what he declared as truma.
Sorry, back up for a second.
No.
When you go in the other direction, she'eda dakov to dakov.
Oh, it's much better.
I'm trying to understand. But so she'eda dakov, if you take off from she'eda dakov for dakov,
It's also not effective. Not effective.
okay.
Means the nakuf has to be tight. The nakuf remains stable. What you took off really was nothing. So what is it if it's nothing? It's only tevel midrabanan. I just want to.
It's still tevel.
Midrabanan. Okay, same thing. This it has to be given to a kohen. By the way, a kohen will also have to remove tithes from it, but it's not tevel doirais. That's why the Mishnah doesn't speak it out. In other words, what the Mishnah is saying is what you did is ineffective, but there's a new gzeira that once you call something truma, you have to give it to a kohen. The difference between this direction or that direction is that if you took it from the Eino Nakuf, the kohen is getting something that's only tabel midrabanan. I'm not minimizing the rabbanan, but it's only tabel midrabanan. If you took it min hanakuf al she'eino nakuf, then what you gave to the kohen is tabel doiraisa. That's it. You got it. Now let me go to the mind.
Rabbi, I'm sorry. Can you just clarify? Any tree that's Eine Nakov, we're saying is chayiv in Meiser is dirabanan?
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
Now, what happens? Tadam in adamai al adamai. I want to clarify just one word, technical. But in the first clause, right here in the Mem Chesam Beis, the word Tadam means Truma Gedoyla. The word Tadam over here cannot mean Truma Gedoyla. You know why? Because from Damai, you never take off Truma Gedoyla. Okay, it doesn't matter. The bottom line is, we learned, right? You designate 10% for Meiser. You don't even give it. You keep 9 and you give 1. That's the Truma. Tadam means Trumas Meiser. What happens now? It's going to get more complicated now. Demai on demai. See, before, Eino Nakuf, guys, Eino Nakuf is for sure biblically exempt. Nakuf, biblically chayiv. Clear. Demai on demai, there's a whole doubt now. If I bought the mai from one Am Ha'aretz, and I bought the mai from another Am Ha'aretz, and we keep on saying you can't be tied on one on the other, because there's a doubt. It could be both Am Ha'aretzim did nothing. I'm talking about Trumas Meiser, nothing. That means they're both biblically obligated. It could be they both did. So what you're doing is just a rabbinic. Could be one did and one didn't, and you don't even know which did and which didn't. Good. Yes. You need a double shot coffee for this. So Taram min adamai al adamai, and it's going to be the same rule. Or if you took it from the demai for tevel, in all of these cases, first of all, truma. What's the rule? Why are we saying truma? I'll tell you. Not the way we say it before in the Mishnah. Before truma is a drabana, like we said. If you declare something truma, even though it's really, really not truma, you give it to the kohen. Not over here. Here, you know what truma means? Truma misafek. Could be midoiraisa truma. Why? Because let's say that both Amei Ha'aretz, from both owners of the demai, neither of them separated trumas ma'aser. So then, when I separated this banafai truma, if I'm taking from demai on vadai, vadai has to be tithed. If the demai was not tithed, so it's tevel for trumas ma'aser, then what I separated is gavaldike truma. But it could be not. So here the pshat truma is that it's truma misafek. It's beautiful. Nevertheless, the item that you were trying to be misaken maybe is not misuken in all of these cases. Because maybe the truma was invalid. Why would the truma be invalid? Just as an example, I bought the mai, right? If the Am Ha'aretz removed the truma smaiser from the demai, so the demai is chulin, the demai is mesukin. When I removed chulin for tevel, or for demai that's tevel, then what I did was nothing. And now that has to be tithed. Good. Next, final case. The final case. Now, min havadai al hademai, the other direction. So I have tevel. Like we said, the reason why I can have tevel, or I grew my own tevel, and I separated from tevel, David, for demai. Now, 1 second. If the demai was really tithed, then when I took off is what? No. If the demai is mamish tithed, fully tithed, it can be misaken again. Then what I took off remains vadai tevel. So even though you have to give it to a kohen, but here you have another layer. The other layer is that this itself needs to be tied midoraisa. Here again, truma. By the way, truma misafek. But the problem here is that maybe what you took off was not effective, and you took it from vadai. If you took it from vadai, vadai is tevel. So now, truma umaisres.
The kohen has to take it.
So the kohen has to take it. Very good.
Same as last mission.
No, okay. No, we have 4 cases. Guys, don't get nervous. We're coming back to it. So whatever you didn't chap now, we'll chap, God willing, later. And Yakira, don't shake your head like that. It's amazing. We're learning new things, guys. We're learning new things. So you have to get used to it. And the beginning of the Mishnah was easy. The beginning of the Mishnah at least was easy for us because we learned it so many times already. This machlekes tanoim, whether yesh kinyan la'akum, that it's Yisrael lafkiya midei ma'aser, or ein kinyan la'akum. So the Gemara points out, opens up the Gemara. Let's see how far down we can get. That our Mishnah follows Rab Meir, only Rab Meir, and not Rabbi Yehuda, not Rab Shimon. The Rabbi Meir, it's Rab Meir that holds ein kinyan l'goy beretz Yisrael gimei ma'aser. Now let's make it clear. However, Rabbi Yehuda and Rab Shimon oimrim yesh kinyan l'goy beretz Yisrael apotrim ma'aser. Another thing that Vlad over here also midrabanan Even according to Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, midrabanan, you have to tithe produce that belong to a goy. You have to tithe it. The big difference will be that according to Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Shimon, if I buy tevel from a yid, l'tzoyrech, and I buy tevel from lahavdol a goy, I cannot be teirim u'ma'aser from one or the other. One is doiraisa, and one only has to be tied to Rabbanan. Very simple. Now, okay, so therefore, our Mishnah follows Rav Meir, which is fine. Stam Mishnah Rav Meir. Now the Gemara is going to begin to give you the reasons behind this machlokes. Let's see how far we can get into. So the first suggested source, biblical source for Shitas Rav Meir. Rabbi Imi b'shem Rav Shimon ben Lakish. Time of the Rav Meir. Now, however, we have a pasuk in Bahar. Pasuk says, "V'hisnachaltem oisam livnechem acharechem loreshes achuza." That's the source in which the Torah juxtaposes avodim to achuza. Achuza is a word that's used to someone who has an estate that passes down as an inheritance, right, from the father to the child, lo'olam. And the Torah is giving over here the isur that if a person owns an Evet Kanani, it has to be treated like an achuza, right? Lo'olam b'hem tavodu, the positive commandment, with the exceptions we learned, right? I think it was Rabban Gamliel we had that he needed dominion, so he was he emancipated the slave. But that's the now this hekish. I know we are familiar with the hekish of not selling, but I'm on trouble now online from that. Like it's going around this din that you can't sell an Evet Kanani. Don't ask. I have a terrible emails that I got mamash just a few days ago. Anyway, that's a din Torah. So hikish achuz avodim ma avodim. Here you go. Atem koinem mehem vehein einam koinem oisam. This Amoida is making the following analogy. Let's make it clear that there's a big difference when you're buying an Evet from a goy versus when a goy is buying an Evet Ivri from a yid. What will be the difference? That when we purchase an Evet from a goy, is there a din of yovel that the Evet goes free? Absolutely not. It's not shaykh. So our purchase is taka lo'olam. Ma'avadim atem koinim. When we buy a Evet Kanani from a goy, the purchase is lo'olam, which is an indication. Let me use these words. It's not just king and peides, it's king and haguf. But vehein einam koinim mikem. But a non-Jew cannot acquire from you an evidivity because an evidivity has to go free on your evil. Now, goy is not bound by the mitzvahs. So if he'll buy an evidivity, he won't let him go on your evil. But therefore, you can't allow for that to happen from the outset. Now, why is it that if an evidivity going free on yovel is a symptom, is an outcome of the fact that you can only acquire the evidivity as king and peides and not king and aguf, and that will be the key to Shitas Rav Meir.
That's how you have to sell him.
And therefore, you can't even sell him to a guy. That's how it. Yeah.
Why can't you sell him as his use, not his body?
Because the guy will never free him because he's not bound by the Torah.
Oh, you put it in the contract.
So if you do it in the contract, it's fine. You're getting off on the wrong detail. We want to show that the type of acquisition that a yid has in a goy is not like a goy has in a yid. Our acquisition is we own it. The goy can only acquire its function. So and the same afachuza atem koine mehem. That if a yid buys property from a goy, he owns the property itself and therefore all of the right of usage. But vehein einam koinem mikem. We're speaking about acquisition in the Holy Land. That if a goy, even if he legally buys land of it without writing anything in the contract, he doesn't own the land itself. He has the right to use the land. Lamai nafkamina. This is the nafkamina. The land has kedusha. That results in it's now you have to tithe everything that grows there. Right here in LA, there's no tumas or maisis. If the guy would actually acquire the land itself, which will be Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, Shitas Rabbi Shimon, then his kinyan will degrade the level of kedusha. We would say, "Yesh kinyan legoy be'eretz Yisrael hafkiyah midei ma'aser." But we learn from this hekish that just like by avodim, it's not the same. Land is also not the same. We buy land, we own the land, and we own the rights to the land. If a guy buys land in Eretz Yisrael, he never owned the land. He doesn't own the land. If he doesn't own the land, it remains Eretz HaKodesh. So therefore, the obligation of Trumos U'Maasros remains. Now, the guy is not going to do it. The guy is not a bar mitzvah. So if I buy produce that grew in the land of a guy Eretz Yisrael, holds Rabbi Meir, I am obligated midoraisa to separate Trumos U'Maasros. Beautiful. That will be